I'd love to introduce our next guest, Juan Gorricho, who is the VP of Global Data at Visa. Today, he's going to talk to us about people and data. In his role, Juan oversees the use of data at Visa to enable revenue through data and to create a data-driven culture. Before joining Visa, he served as the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Partners Federal Credit Union, one of the top credit unions in the country, exclusively serving the Walt Disney Company employees, where he held the development and execution of Partners' data strategy. Prior to Partners, Juan led multiple multi-million-dollar projects to implement business intelligence and analytical solutions for key lines of business, such as labor operations and merchandise within the Walt Disney Company Parks and Resorts segment. He has more than 20 years of experience in the data and analytics space and frequently speaks at data and analytics related conferences, such as this. Welcome to the stage, Juan. All right. Hello, Juan. Welcome to the DATAcated conference. Really great to have you here. I can see you. I can hear you. I'll be backstage if you need me. You've got 10 minutes, and then we'll be back to ask some questions.
Awesome. So thank you, Kate. Thank you so much for having me, and good morning, good evening, wherever you are today. It's very cool. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be here, sharing some of my experiences in data analytics and in this topic of people and data. I usually, when I go to this conference or these events, I usually like to talk about some of what I call the elements of sort of the underlying foundation that enables success in data analytics. And that can be a lot of what I call the invisible infrastructure or the invisible components, such as, for example, things like data quality, data governance, right, use of data, right, ethics, people. I think that in my experience, there's a lot of content on all the other dimensions of data, like especially technology, data science, AI. But I think in general, people tend to overlook some of these sort of underlying components that at the end of the day are the ones that make success or that drive and enable success in data analytics. And so from my perspective, people is one of those components, right? And people play, of course, multiple roles in data and analytics. And sort of to walk you through my thinking here, I want to use a couple of slides very quickly that if we can highlight. Thank you, Kate. We'll make the point. I will not, spend a lot of time here. So this is sort of like a very basic framework that I put together many years ago. And by the way, this is, of course, nothing earth-shattering. Just be very obvious. Feel free to use, reuse, whatever. In that, as Serena was saying before, at the end of the day, data work, and I call these insights, drive action that then has an impact, right? If what you're doing in data is not connected to impact or to business outputs through actions, then it's an academic exercise or may not have as much, will not have a clear impact and a clear success. From my experience, right, I think the way that happens is that you have data teams mainly driving the insights, the data solutions, the data products, and then you have operational teams taking action and actually, realizing the value of your data solutions, right? And there's a third dimension. I will not go into this. This is way too detailed. But basically, you get the point of, to get to outcomes, you have data teams that actually are the ones creating solutions, right? People play a key role. You have people doing the data work. You have data engineers, data scientists, data analysts, right? You'll then have operational teams, which are the teams, as I mentioned before, using the outcomes of the data products to make decisions, to have an impact, right, and to ultimately collect the outcomes. And in this whole ecosystem, you have the executive, that are sponsoring actually these programs and they securing the resources to make this happen. The key dimension that I think the key element of people that I think is sometimes overlooked and goes back a little bit to what Serena was highlighting is that for all this to bring success, there's a lot of relationships and there's actually partnerships that need to be established between these sort of different teams and different components. And at the end of the day, it's people talking to people, right? It's people, convincing people, it's people understanding the problems of other people and building the right solutions, what makes sense. Okay, that makes sense and have an impact. And in my experience, this happens, or this is important or critical, regardless if you have the data teams being part of operational teams or like decentralized model of data science teams being embedded with the business of the product teams, or if it's actually centralized data teams that provide services to the business teams that are taking action. At the end of the day, right, and as Serena was highlighting, the main thing is, can people in the data side understand, connect with the people on the outcome, on the operational team side, to actually, make sure that, the business problem that is being solved is understood, the value of analytics is understood. Can the people on the operational side understand what the data teams are working on, and can they actually build the partnerships to implement data solutions and the things that are needed in order to have success in data analytics, right? Can data teams and operational teams work together to get the sponsorship from the executives, through selling the value, through showing the value that actually are driving a lot of the things that, or securing the resources that are needed to, build data solutions, to implement data solutions in the operational processes, the business processes, through data and analytics. And so to illustrate this example, or to this point, I'm going to walk you through an example of a few years ago when I was leading a data team in a financial services institution. And at that point in time, we were trying to basically implement a recommendation engine. So very simple, right? It's a financial service institution, think a bank, right, that has 10 different products that consumers use. And some consumers use some products, some consumers different products. So we wanted to actually implement a recommendation engine that actually was recommending the best solution for the consumers that didn't have a product, or the best product to be consumed. On the data side, right, on the sort of the insights, like it took us about, I don't know, say 1-2 weeks to pull the data, build a very like version 0, V0, V1 of the model. Then we actually ended up spending about 8 to 10 weeks working with the different teams that actually had to take that solution and embed in the processes and change their behaviors to actually use the outcomes of the model to recommend products. And here the challenge is, again, we were bumping into change management. Right? People thought that, like, what I'm doing, I'm doing what's right. Like, when someone calls the call center, I know the customer, I know what's recommended to the customer based on what I see they have, right? There are people, unwilling to change. And again, the degree of change was actually fairly simple, in the sense that we were asking people to just say, when the call comes, you'll see a pop-up, recommend product number 1, and actually just take some notes, and we'll map behind the scenes what happened eventually, right? And so, again, 8 weeks of this pilot were spent just convincing people, change management, getting people to understand what they were doing, right? Like, make sure that they understood how to use it, train them. We had multiple false starts because we started and people were not using it. And so here the point is, very basic data, very basic model, a lot of energy spent in actually showing the results, or actually getting people to use the predictive model. And at the end of the day, right, the process was successful, right? We were able to actually do an A/B test. We had a team of people in the call center using the outcomes of the recommendation engine. We had a bunch of people not using it. Were to compare the results, significant increase in sales for the group that actually was using the recommendation engine versus people who weren't using the recommendation engine. And, we were able to prove success. But the energy we had to spend was significant in just the change management, the education, the training, the data culture, right? The data literacy aspects of using a data solution that they all thought they already had fine-tuning their gut instinct, or basically instinct-based decision-making models. I think another key success factor, as I talked before, is that the partnership that I had established from the get-go as the head of data with the head of customer service, who oversaw the use of the branches and the call center, was critical, right? Because then we were able to jointly understand what is the value that we're trying to get here. Like, why is it important to have a recommendation engine? Like, what is the business outcome we want out of this? Which Serena highlighted in her presentation before, is at the end of the day, data has to have data solutions, data analytics, predictive data science, whatever you call it, has to have a very clear business impact that actually gets to some measurable business outcomes. And so that was that partnership that established at the executive level. We're able to actually drive out of the top-down sponsorship to make things happen that eventually get success, even though there was a lot of friction at the operational level. The final thing I'll say, in all this, to sort of continue to highlight this point of the data importance of people in data analytics and data solutions, is that, if you look at any of the existing sort of chief data officer surveys that Gartner conducts one, they do a fantastic survey every year of chief data officers. Randy Bean in New Vantage Partners, he also does an annual survey of chief data officers. When you look at the obstacles or the main sort of barriers to success in data analytics, they are not technology barriers. Usually are about culture, people, change management. And at the end of the day, right, it all comes down to, when you think about the culture of an organization to adopt data analytics, it comes down to basically people, working with people to understand the value of data solutions and data and analytics. So I hope this was useful. Again, it's a very basic sort of overview of my thinking in data analytics. I'm very active in LinkedIn and Twitter, so happy to connect with all of you eventually. So, and thank you for having me here, Kate.
Absolutely. Then thank you so much for your presentation, Juan. Really, really insightful. We do have plenty of questions that came in, but I want to start with my own question. Now, you mentioned that you created a recommendation engine in a financial services company. First of all, I love how you said, "Oh, it was very simple," where most people in the world probably would not have called it, "Oh, this was very simple to do." But glad that you called it that. I wanted to follow up and ask, what were some of your lessons learned from that experience?
Well, I think thank you, Kate. That's great, because the point I make about making the model very simple was that in our case, we're looking at optimizing the system, not the model, right? So I can tell you, version 1 of the model was very basic. Like, this is nothing fancy, no decision trees, nothing. It's just basically something pseudo-randomly choosing products, right? Basically based on some constraints and some rules. Yeah. But what we're aiming at was that having a full system end-to-end that takes data, predicts, recommends model that is embedded in the operational process, that is then used by the call center agents, that then we can track at the end to see if the customer bought or not bought the recommended product, was way more important than having a beautiful, super optimized, chaining the link that then had no sort of inputs or outputs that were successful. So, and I think that to me is the biggest lesson learned, that, think of the system, think systemically. You go back to my slides, the last slide, is basically think about this optimization loop that you have to build. Think about the loop, right? In terms of taking data, building algorithms, right? Taking action, measuring the impact, and improve the system over time, right? That's way, way, way more important than having any perfect element in this loop be optimized.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for explaining that. We had a question here from Auntie. He's asking, what are some best practices for the change management part? What do you do? What do you not do?
I think Serena nailed it when she talked about it before. It's just build relationships, empathy, right? Talk to your stakeholders, right? What are the pain points? There's a lot of people. I think the issue with change management is that people feel sometimes that it's imposed, but if you actually build something that is better than they're using today, that if you're able to have the empathy to understand what are the pain points, and you can come with solutions that address those pain points, the target destination for change is way more appealing than the current state. And so people naturally will go to the more appealing option, but that requires heavy investment in relationship building, understanding, what people want, what they need, like how they operate. And also, I think that as a data team, there's a lot of importance in making sure that, at least this is my philosophy, that we take a very focused sort of attitude in terms of enablement, right? We are here to serve and enable others. It's not about, me versus you. It's not about it's about all of us getting better and enabling the use of data. So if you, again, empathy, connection, if you're able to understand what they want and what they need, you can build targets destination for change that are going to be more appealing.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's one of the biggest obstacles I've seen in any type of change management issues, is convincing your target audience that what they're going to have is way better and will provide a lot more value than what they currently have. I think the difficulty is getting them over that hurdle, because not nobody, but most people are adverse to change. They want it the way that they have it now. Why do we need to change anything? So being able to tell those stories and convince them of why we need to do this is important.
You got it.
Yeah, Nish has a question on this topic as well. Have there been any times in your career where you faced difficulties with data management and business alignment?
Oh, plenty, right? Plenty. And I think it sort of goes back to sort of not doing what I said we should do, right? Which is like not eating my own dog food, right? Which is basically, there was another project when I was with Disney labor operations. Again, we built this fantastic labor forecasting system to optimize the amount of labor that the parks need to operate the attractions, but we failed to actually connect with operators, who are the ones making on-the-ground decisions on how much labor to use, right? And yeah, so a lot of emphasis was put like, hey, this is a beautiful model with like this fantastic, like, R squared and MAPE and this and that and all these like gobbledygook in terms of data science, which the operator, like at the end is like, I don't get what this is. Like, I couldn't care less, right? I used to get 10 people, now I'm getting 8 people. This makes no sense to me, right? And so complete misalignment between the data and how you think about data and the business needs and how business thinks and operates, right? And so that actually resulted in friction of adoption of the new sort of recommendations and the new solutions, because again, we had missed completely talking to the key stakeholders who were being impacted by this.
All right, thank you. And then we've got a question here from Christine. She says that psychology at an individual or organizational level plays a hidden role in data science. Sometimes people are not ready for change. So how do you prepare an organization for change?
I think this goes sort of there's plenty of frameworks for change management, right? You have sort of your early adopters, the fence sitters, and the ones who are always sort of in denial. I think I got it right, but I'm sure most likely I didn't get it right. But at the end of the day, right, that what I've seen work is two things. What I've said before about the target state has to be better and has to be clearly communicated that it's better than the current state. Right? And there's many ways of doing that. There's many times in which that's not doable if you're, for example, executing on compliance projects or things that you have to do, right? But when there's an option, make the target state way more appealing than the current state. And I think that the second thing is I've leveraged the Me Too factor sort of in the sense of if I get this, I'm gonna I want what I'm getting from that person, right? So take the early adopters, right, and work with them, because there's usually plenty of early adopters that actually want to get the benefit of what you're trying to do, right? If you work with them, then you're usually going to end up the others, the fence sitters, and sort of the ones in denial saying, oh, that's pretty cool. I want some of that.
Right.
At the end of the day, there's always going to be elements that you'll have to drag through change, right? And this is where sort of stick and carrot, right? Having strong partnerships at the top so you can, at the end of the day, sort of do some top-down mandates to make change happen is important. So it's a multi-pronged approach to make it happen.
What do you think works best, the carrot or the stick for driving change?
The carrot, absolutely, right? If you can get people to drive, like to get to change on their own, right, because of their own incentives and because of how they think about it, absolutely 100%, right? Sometimes you need a stick, right? Sometimes you need to make it happen, but leverage the carrot as much as you can.
Yes, I agree. And it's also healthier, right? That's
Exactly.
Juan, I want to thank you very much for making the time for chatting with us here today and for answering the questions from the audience. I really appreciate your presentation. I definitely learned a lot, so thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Kate.
Awesome.